A boy walked in, 17 years old, black, slim build, nervous but composed. A second-hand blazer too big for his frame hung off his shoulders, and in one hand he carried a beat-up briefcase that looked like it had seen more schoolwork than legal files. His sneakers squeaked with each step as he made his way toward the defense table. The whispers came immediately. "Who is that? Is he in the right place? Is this some kind of joke?" Judge Reynolds raised a brow. Smirk played at the corner of his lips as he leaned toward the microphone. "This isn't a high school field trip," he said dryly. "You sure you're not lost? Maybe meant to be in the gym instead of my courtroom." Laughter rippled through the room. On the prosecution's side, Franklin Moore, the landlord's smug, well-paid attorney, chuckled into his hand, lounging back like the case had already been won. But the boy didn't even blink. He stepped up to the defense table, stood tall, and looked the judge straight in the eyes. "No, Your Honor," he said, his voice calm and clear. "I'm representing the defendant, my mother." The room went completely still. You could hear chairs creak, mouths part in disbelief. Even Moore stopped smiling. Jordan Carter, 17, no law degree, no firm behind him, just truth and the fire to defend the one person who'd always defended him. For a second, even Judge Reynolds didn't know how to respond. "You're what?" he said, narrowing his eyes. "I'm representing my mother," Jordan repeated. "All paperwork was filed with the clerk yesterday. I'm authorized to speak on her behalf." The judge looked down, flipping through the documents in front of him. He paused, looked again. The stamp was there, signed, official. The clerk gave a small, nervous nod from the side of the room. "It's all in order, Your Honor." Reynolds leaned back in his chair and stared at the boy standing before him. "This is highly irregular," he muttered. "But it's legal." Jordan didn't move. "I'll allow it," the judge said at last, his tone somewhere between disbelief and challenge. "But understand, this is a courtroom. If you're in over your head, it won't end well." "I understand," Jordan replied. He opened his briefcase and began laying out his documents with quiet precision. And the room? Still, dead silent. Every single person was watching him now. Not laughing, not whispering, just watching. You wouldn't believe it if you weren't sitting there yourself. A black teenager with no formal legal education stepping into a courtroom filled with adults trained to tear people apart. Can you imagine? A kid with no law degree, no firm behind him, no years of courtroom experience, standing alone against a professional lawyer and a judge who didn't want to take him seriously. But he was ready, because what Jordan lacked in legal titles, he made up for in preparation. He had spent nights studying, highlighting housing laws, printing out court documents at the library, and cross-referencing everything against his own case. He didn't come to play defense. He came to win, and the judge, whether he liked it or not, was starting to realize it. Judge Reynolds gave the nod to begin. "Let's proceed," he said. "Prosecution, you have the floor." Franklin Moore rose smoothly, adjusted his designer suit, straightened his tie like he was about to perform, not argue. He walked to the center of the courtroom, voice dripping with practiced confidence. "Your Honor, this is a clear-cut case of neglect," Moore began. "Miss Carter has failed to make rent payments, repeatedly. The landlord has made multiple attempts to resolve this, all of which were ignored." He snapped open a folder and held up a stack of papers. "These are documented notices, each one showing missed payments. And this," he continued, holding up a final page, "is the final notice, dated and served according to proper legal procedures." He walked the evidence up to the judge with the ease of a man who had done this 100 times before. Then he turned toward Jordan. "No further comments," Moore said, his smile smug, "unless the young man would like to object." Chuckles in the courtroom. Even the judge looked amused. Jordan stood slowly, calm, focused. "I would," he said simply. Jordan didn't raise his voice. He didn't stumble. He didn't try to match Moore's theatrical delivery. He just spoke. Clear, direct, controlled. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a carefully organized folder. "Your Honor," Jordan said, "these are bank statements showing my mother's rent payments, made in full and on time." He walked them to the judge. Moore's eyes narrowed slightly. "These," Jordan continued, "are the landlord's receipts. You'll see the signatures. You'll see the dates, and they align with every transaction on our bank statements." He returned to the table and pulled out a second stack of documents. "These are photographs of our apartment," he said. "You'll notice extensive black mold in the bedroom, a leaking pipe in the kitchen, and a front door lock that's been broken since March." He took a breath, then held up one final sheet, highlighted in yellow. "And this," he said, "is Section 14 of the Local Tenant Protection Ordinance. It clearly states that a landlord cannot issue an eviction if the property violates minimum habitability standards. Silence. Jordan turned slightly toward Moore. Which, as I've just shown, it does. The courtroom didn't move. The laughter was gone. Even Moore's smirk had started to fade. Jordan was dismantling him, one fact at a time. And he wasn't done yet. Jordan flipped to another page in his folder. I've also included a copy of the city's housing inspection report from last year, he said. The landlord was cited for 3 violations, none of which were ever corrected. That alone disqualifies this eviction under Housing Code 22B. Judge Reynolds leaned forward, scanning the documents. His expression shifted. Not quite impressed, but no longer dismissive either. Franklin Moore stood rigid. Objection, Your Honor, he said. This is not a certified attorney. He shouldn't be citing legal code like he's passed the bar. The judge didn't even look at Moore. Objection overruled, he said. He's clearly done his homework. Jordan didn't gloat. He didn't grin. He just nodded once, like he expected that result all along. Moore tried to recover. The fact remains, rent was late. Jordan stepped forward again. No, it wasn't, he said. The landlord cashed every check within 5 days of receipt. That alone proves acceptance of payment. Under state statute, that's considered acknowledgement of continued tenancy. He held up a bank printout. This transaction log shows the deposits made by the landlord himself. Now Moore was visibly flustered. He grabbed at his papers, flipping too fast, looking for something, anything that could punch back. But Jordan had already taken the fight. He wasn't reacting. He was controlling the entire room. Even the jury, though not required in this hearing, was watching with a kind of quiet awe. Because no one expected this, not from a teenager, not from a boy they all assumed was in over his head. But here he was, calmly dismantling everything they thought they knew about what power looked like in a courtroom. Jordan returned to the defense table and pulled out one final piece of paper. This is a signed letter from a former tenant in the same building, he said. She moved out last year after filing 3 maintenance complaints, none of which were addressed. He handed it to the judge. Moore didn't speak. And I have 3 more, Jordan added, ready to testify if necessary. The judge looked at Moore. Anything to say? Moore opened his mouth, closed it, then finally muttered, No, Your Honor. The judge leaned back, took a slow breath, and folded his hands. He looked down at the eviction order, the pile of evidence Jordan had submitted, and the silence now echoing through the courtroom. Then he said flatly, Case dismissed. Angela Carter, sitting in the back row, burst into tears. Her hands flew to her mouth, and she shook with silent sobs. Relief, pride, and years of exhaustion all crashing down at once. Jordan turned to her, smiled, and finally let himself breathe. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The courtroom wasn't erupting in noise. It was something else, something deeper, a kind of respect that fills the air without words. Even Franklin Moore quietly cacked up his files. No smirks, no clever remarks, just silence. And Judge Reynolds? He didn't joke. He didn't smirk. He just looked at Jordan, gave the faintest nod, and said, You may have a future in law. Young man, but Jordan wasn't thinking about law school. He was thinking about home, about the apartment they didn't lose, about the mother who could finally sleep in peace tonight. Because on that day, in that courtroom, the smartest, boldest, most prepared person in the room wasn't a lawyer. It was her son. Outside the courthouse, people were still talking about what they'd just seen. Reporters scribbled notes. Court staff stood in clusters, shaking their heads and muttering things like, That kid really did it. You knew the law better than half the attorneys that walk through here. Angela clutched her son's arm as they stepped out into the sunlight. Jordan, she whispered, you didn't just defend me. You made them see me. He smiled at her, quiet and proud. You've always deserved to be seen, he said. Word spread fast. By the end of the day, clips from the courtroom were being shared online. People started calling him the teen attorney. A few even suggested someone should start a scholarship fund. But Jordan didn't want fame. He just wanted his mom to sleep without fear. That night, back in their apartment, the lights flickered in the hallway again, and the leaky pipe in the kitchen still dripped like a ticking clock. But something was different now. Jordan sat at the table, reviewing the paperwork one last time, making notes in the margins. Angela heated leftovers. Music played softly in the background. Baby, she said, I don't know how you did that. Jordan looked up. I just read everything twice. She smiled and shook her head. No, you listened. You looked at what no one else wanted to see, and you believed me. That's what made the difference. He didn't say anything at first. Then, I believed in the law too, I had to, because if that didn't protect us, what would? Angela's eyes welled again, but she wiped them away quickly. Later that night, Jordan sat alone on the porch. The city hummed quietly, sirens in the distance. Someone laughing 2 streets over, a bus engine groaning as it crawled through the neighborhood. He thought about the courtroom, about how Moore didn't see him coming, about how even the judge, at first, only saw a kid with no credentials. But he also thought about all the kids just like him, reading contracts they don't understand, signing papers out of fear, walking into courtrooms without anyone on their side. He thought about what might have happened if he hadn't spoken up. And that's when it hit. This wasn't just about winning one case. It was about making sure people like his mother, like so many others, knew they had a right to stand up, a right to fight back, even if no one else believed they could. The next morning, Jordan got a letter. Not a legal notice, not another threat, but a plain envelope, handwritten, slipped under their door. Inside was a note. Saw what you did in court. My sister's going through something similar. I don't know the law, but if you ever have time, maybe you could help. There was no name, just a phone number. Jordan held the paper for a long time. Angela stepped out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. What is it? She asked. Jordan looked up. Someone needs help, he said. She watched him read it again. You're not done, are you? She asked softly. He shook his head, not even close. The next morning, Jordan found an envelope slipped quietly under the door. Not an official letter, no threats. Just a simple, handwritten note inside. It read, Saw you in court yesterday. My sister's fighting a case like that too. I don't know much about the law, but if you ever have a moment, maybe you could help. No name, just a phone number. Jordan stared at the paper, the weight of the message sinking in. Angela appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel. What's that? She asked. Jordan looked up, voice steady but soft. Someone needs help, he said. She watched him reread the note, a quiet question in her eyes. You're not done yet, are you? He shook his head. Not even close. Word of Jordan's courtroom performance had begun to spread, not through headlines, but whispers, the kind that travel faster than truth. A teenage kid, dressed like a public defender, dismantling seasoned attorneys. It sounded like myth, but people were listening. By the end of the week, 3 more families had reached out. One had a son in a similar bind, another, a mother who never got to speak during her own hearing. The third simply said, they never let us finish our story. Jordan wasn't sure what to do with it all. He didn't have a degree. He didn't have an office. But he had a reputation now. And that somehow felt heavier than any title. Angela arranged for them to meet a retired attorney, someone who owed her a favor. They met in a back booth of a quiet diner, away from ears. The man was sharp-eyed and cautious. So, you're the kid, he said, stirring his coffee. You understand what you're playing with here? Jordan nodded. I'm not playing. The man leaned forward. Good, because if you're serious, I might know how to make some of this legal, or at least safer. They talked for hours, about loopholes, precedents, ways to walk the line without crossing it. By the end, the man scribbled a few names on a napkin. People you can trust, he said. Mostly. Jordan folded the napkin like it was gold. Their apartment, once silent, had turned into a quiet storm of strategy. Case files borrowed, phone calls on speaker, Angela typing notes, while Jordan paced the room, breaking down arguments like puzzles. Late one night, Angela stopped typing. You know, she said, most teenagers are out messing around or glued to their phones. Jordan smiled, not looking up from his notes. Guess I missed the memo. She shook her head, watching him, pride mixed with fear. Just promise me one thing, she said. If it gets too big, too dangerous, you'll walk away. Jordan finally looked up. I can't promise that, he said, not when I know what happens if I do. Silence filled the room again, but this time it wasn't empty. Jordan's fight was never just about one courtroom or one family. It was about something bigger, a system that too often silences the people who need justice the most. If this part of his journey moved you, share it. Let others know that courage doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears sneakers and carries a borrowed binder. Drop a comment if you've ever seen someone underestimated, or if you've been that someone. Share this story with someone who believes in second chances, in standing up, and in rewriting the rules. Subscribe to follow the next steps in Jordan's journey, because the fight isn't over. Sometimes the next hero in the courtroom isn't who you expect.